guys. How you guys doing?
How's it going, Terry?
Great,
All right.
sir.
How's it going, Jeff?
Chris, how you doing?
Before we get started, I want to introduce my guest just a little bit. You know, Chris Allo here was a guest on my 2021 Halloween show with Chris Garantano. We named the top 10 horror films that had hard rock and metal songs, should I say, horror film podcaster, a heavy metal podcaster. And then Jeff Westlake is a music producer, engineer, songwriter of audio porn, founder and guitarist of the band Hydrogyn, which licensed a couple songs in my movie Terry R. Wickham's Double Vision. We got a little special show tonight. This is actually something I've been wanting to do, believe it or not, for over 2 years. I really feel like when people look at a heavy metal, hard rock listener, they probably have a preconceived notion of what they're like in terms of their lifestyle and what kind of music they kind of would only like. I think there's kind of a stereotype, which I love breaking. And by that, what I mean is my whole life, I've always felt you don't have to be what people think you should be or what they tell you should be, even down to your parents and your friends and your peers. Just to give you an example, and I'm not trying to preach or whatever, but growing up, I was raised in a Mormon family. So, you know, with a Mormon family, it's very conservative, lots of kids, no smoking, no drinking, no drugs. You know, when you think of a Mormon family, and I'm not an active Mormon anymore, I haven't been for like 40 years. I love horror films, and that kind of totally goes against the grain of what the LDS church believes in. My grandma always thought I was a devil worshiper when I had posters of Judas Priest and Kiss on my wall, and I was watching Friday the 13th and Dawn of the Dead. She thought I was possessed by a demon or something. But at the same time, when you think of a horror film guy, people probably think you're nuts, you're not very smart, you don't pay attention in school. And I like to think that I broke that stereotype because I'm a voracious reader. I read so many books. It's insane. I'm reading 10 books right now. And what I mean by that is because I'm a film director, I thought it would be a good practice to be able to go from story to story, in and out, because when you make a movie, you never shoot in order. You based on location, based on, you know, all factors. I've trained myself over 30, 40 years of reading part of one book at my job and part of a different book in my car, part of a different book at my second job, a couple different books at home. So like right now, I'm actually reading 10 different books and I can jump in and out of them like that. I'm a bookworm. I'm a heavy metal guy, never smoked one cigarette in my entire life. Think about it. I'm a heavy metal freak. I've been listening to it since I was in the early 70s with Black Sabbath, Led Zeppelin, Judas Priest, Kiss, you know, Nazareth, Scorpions, and the list goes on and on. I've been listening to heavy metal all that time, never done any drugs. I didn't even try marijuana. Probably came from the Mormon upbringing. So for me, it was never about the lifestyle. It was about the music. So again, I'm not trying to preach or anything. But what I'm saying is, and then I'm also always been an athlete. I played soccer when I was in the 3rd to 5th grade. I was a team captain, center forward, scored 80-something goals in 3 years. Played basketball, football, baseball in high school. I'm athletic, but I'm not a jock. I'm a heavy metal guy, but I don't do drugs or smoke or drink. And I'm a Mormon that likes heavy metal and horror films. So what I'm trying to say is, just because we like Metallica and Megadeth and Slayer and all these other bands, it doesn't mean we couldn't like music that you would totally be surprised by. So that's the theme of our show tonight. The top 10 albums you would never expect from a lifelong hard rock, heavy metal listener. Why don't we just go by alphabetically? Let's go Chris, then Jeff, and then I will go last. And we're going to go from the 10 down to 1, and we'll give our album and why we like it. So Chris, you got the floor, my friend.
Okay, all right. Yeah, I definitely can't beat that introduction, Terry. I'm not even going to try, but yeah, I mean, this, you know, for me, I don't want to say I'm stereotypical, but yeah, I'm somewhat stereotypical in that, you know, my wheelhouse is pretty much hard rock and metal. So these are like the 10 albums that I listen to that are not, you know, classified as hard rock or metal. Yeah, I love horror movies. That's going to be frequented a lot on my list. And yeah, I love metal, and I also love old school porn. So my first pick is Sexorama. I have both volumes. I couldn't find Sexorama 1 in my collection, but this is Sexorama 2. These are re-recordings of soundtracks, old 70s porno movies. They put Janet Jameson on the cover to sell copies, but she's got nothing to do with it. But, you know, I love the funky bow chicka bow bow music from the 70s that played in all old school pornos, and it just makes me laugh. You know, whenever I hear this stuff, it just, you know, forget the porn part, it just makes me giggle just listening to all this music. So yeah, that's my that's my pick for number 10, Sexorama. I think this came out in the 90s, I want to say. I forget. But yeah, it's a good goof.
All right, you're up next, Jeff. That was a good one.
All right, yeah, that was good, Chris. Doing what I do, I find myself liking a wide variety of music. Anybody who ever gets in a car with me and I put my iPhone on shuffle to go over the Bluetooth system, never fails. People sit there and I'll see their heads turn over to look at me and they'll be like, what? My first one can be a typical situation. It could be considered metal because the guy used to be in a really voracious hard rock heavy metal band in the early 70s. Quite arguably may have written the most famous riff ever. It's Blackmore's Night, Ghost of a Rose. We're talking about medieval music with his wife, Candace Knight, and what I like about this so much is the musicality. You know, it's still, even though it's medieval and it's got those, you know, those overtones to it, it's still Richie Blackmore on guitar. I mean, good Lord, what else do you want for a guitar? But the whole band is just great. And her voice, she reminds me, quite honestly, Terry, of Julie and Hydrogyn. So it kind of really brings things home for me. You know, Blackmore's Night, that would be number 10. It has a little connection to what we all dig, but at the same time, it's a completely different genre of music. But I just like it for the over-the-top musicality. And, you know, you hear instruments that you just don't hear anywhere else, except unless you like Jethro Tull. You get to hear flutes and, you know, and all these odd instruments and music, and it just works really well. But that's number 10 for me.
That's a great choice.
I interviewed Candace Knight for one of the rock magazines I was writing for in the late 2010s, and she was a doll. She was a very, very sweet lady.
Dude, she's freaking gorgeous.
Yeah.
I mean, drop dead gorgeous.
Yes. Gorgeous lady, but very, very sweet too.
All right, so I'm going to go with my number 10. I think it's one that no one would probably expect from me, but I honestly really love it. And it's kind of like the greatest hits album. I just liked it because it kind of got everything in one fell swoop. And it's Sade, the best of Sade. I love her earthy quality of the Nigerian born British kind of pop star that she brings. It's weird when you hear her talk like in an interview. She's got like a deep voice.
Yeah.
Which you wouldn't think from the way she looks and all that. I think she's surrounded by a highly diverse group of musicians, guitar players, bass, keyboard, drums, the whole bit. I don't think there's they kind of cross a lot of musical boundaries. I just think that some of my favorite songs she's done, like No Ordinary Love, that was used in the movie Indecent Proposal. That's one of my favorite songs. Jezebel, Sweetest Taboo, Kiss of Life. That's my choice for number 10, Best of Sade.
Back up to me. All right. Yeah, this is kind of cheating, but kind of not. I'm lumping these all together. The movie, I always said that the band that changed my life was Black Sabbath, but a couple of years before I got into that, the movie that changed my life was Star Wars. And I'm a huge fan of film scores. Man, the first film score that I really got into was Star Wars. This is the 6-disc box set I got a couple years ago of the original trilogy, Star Wars, Empire, and Jedi, from John Williams. But man, you know, when I was a kid and, I heard, and there was no way to experience the movie again as a 6-year-old in 1977. So you got the comic book and the novel and the soundtrack, but I just loved the music and, you know, I just loved the orchestration and I just love soundtrack. That's when I got into soundtracks as a young kid, and still to this day, big film score fan.
I think that is a big part of all three of our lives because that all happened to all three of us at the same point in our lives.
Yeah.
Awesome choice.
Now this is the part where I really start to blow people's minds. Huge fan of this guy. Have been since I was a kid, since he came out, basically. I think some of these things will make some people go, what? Really, 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 really huge fan of Hank Williams Jr. and in particular, the Whiskey Bent Hellbound album. OD'd in Denver, White Lightning, so many great songs on there. I don't know what it was. I think that album, even when I was younger, because a lot of it was acoustic rock, basically an acoustic country thing, except for a few, of course, a few songs they pumped up, but the mix was still real light and it was still in the country vein. For some reason, that album just stuck with me from the minute I heard it. Here I am all these years later, and I still listen to it probably once every couple weeks.
Great choice, and unexpected too, which I think is great.
I didn't expect to see Star Wars either. So Chris is over there. Chris
Yeah.
is over getting ready to throw the spitball to us.
My number 9 choice is also a soundtrack, and it's going to be one that probably nobody would ever choose, especially a guy listening to, Megadeth and Metallica and Metal Church and all that good stuff. But this one, I feel a really deep emotional kind of connection with because of where the location it takes place. But it's All the Right Moves, the original soundtrack, which is really a mix of gritty pop, R&B, and soul, and it focuses on overcoming the odds to achieve your goals in a really small town. They shot the movie in Johnstown, Pennsylvania, kind of a small river town, almost like a coal mining town with factories and a school, everybody knows each other. That was Tom Cruise and Leah Thompson and Craig T. Nelson. And my last 2 years of my high school was spent in a town called Snohomish, Washington. And it was really similar to that. It was a river town, one high school, everybody knew each other. And I'll tell you what, I love that feel. I love that close-knit community where nobody kind of thought they were better than anyone else. You had a real unity to it. The high school I was at before that, kind of rich kids thought they were better than anybody else. I love that small town feel. And with the soundtrack, which again, there's no hard rock. Some of the songs that really stood out to me are All the Right Moves by Chris Thompson and Jennifer Warren, The Last Stand by Doug Kahan, This Could Be Our Last Chance, Danny Spanos, and Blue Skies Forever by Frankie Miller. Those are like blues soul. But
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, I can relate to that small town feel. It's very blue collar, which I feel I've always been a blue collar guy, even though I'm a filmmaker and all that. I work 2 jobs, plus I make movies. So I just love that feel of that movie and those songs from that soundtrack.
Good pick.
Nice. Yeah, that's a good one. I haven't seen that movie in a long time. But Leah
Real long
Thompson,
time.
Leah Thompson looked great in that movie. I do remember that.
Yeah. And it was before Cruise got a little wacky.
Yeah. All right, my next pick, this is kind of a weird one, but, you asked for it. So this kind of goes with my Sexorama pick. This one, I never listened to the whole album from start to finish, but I have it on I have the tracks on my iPod, which I still listen to in the car all the time. And I love when tracks, some of the shorter ones too, when they come up on random. This is the album Talk Dirty to Me from one of my favorite porn stars, Sasha Grey. Basically, she just recorded an album where it sounds like she's having sex with you for an hour. And, on the track list, it says Sasha talks to you during oral, anal, doggy, cowgirl, missionary, fast, slow. There's like 40 tracks, and it's really ridiculous. But again, it's very funny, and I like when it comes up, during random, and it just, she'll be moaning and tell you to do whatever, and it's very funny. So,
That's a surprise pick, right, Jeff?
Absolutely.
you just don't want to play it when your mom's around.
My next one is, again, like I said, I produce a lot of different styles. I've done everything from death metal to rap. And so I've had everything in between too. And I've been blessed to be let work with some extremely talented people, some great voices, some great players. But this next one, I remember when I first heard this person, I was like, wow, what is that? And of course, she went on to become a mega million star. But I've seen her live a couple of times and just floored by how well she sounds live. But I think it's the delivery, it's the raspiness of the voice, and it's the command of the guitar and all that stuff. But it would have to be Jules' Pieces of You album. Just find that to be a fantastic album. I find her to be fantastic. And then when I actually got into a venue and saw her live, I was like, wouldn't mind taking that home. But she's just fantastic. Her music, I've played her music out whenever I've done covered shows in the past. Really good stuff. And and a lot of people do, we all like our stuff for different reasons. For me, I find myself, when I like something, it's because somehow that music's connected with me. It's like a connection right to soul. And I found that she did that immediately. Now, not all of her stuff does that for me, but that particular album does.
That's really interesting because, you know, when I was recasting my movie recently for the lead role, the new movie I'm doing, Terry R. Wickham's Anomaly, she was one of the people I was thinking of trying to approach. My next one is a guy that's done a lot of film scoring. This was from one of his early albums that was not a soundtrack. There used to be a label called Windham Hill Music, which was really new age.
Yeah.
It's new age. And when I was in the Army in the mid-'80s, I was stationed in Kaiserslautern, Germany. I took an 8-hour train trip one time while I was there to go see a fellow soldier I went with my AIT with, which is Fort Ben Harrison, Indiana. He was stationed in Augsburg, Germany. I was in Kaiserslautern. So it's like an 8-hour train trip. And what I remember most is when I got there, he tried to turn me on to Windham Hill, some of the, you know, new age artists of Windham Hill. And at the time, you're talking 85, so that was like VHS, wasn't DVD, it might have been Laserdisc too. And he played me some of the stuff, and I ended up buying this one album from the artist Mark Isham, and the album's called Film Music. And it's basically tracks of 3 movies he did music for: Miss Soulful, which I think had Mel Gibson in, The Times of Harvey Milk, and Never Cry Wolf. To this day, I've never seen any one of those films, but the music is so touching. It's very soft. It's very sensitive. I immediately hooked to it. I liked it a lot. I've been listening to that, since 1985. And he went on to do Blade and all these other big movies. He's a huge, The Mist, he scored all these big movies, but that was one of his early releases and I loved it.
Mine, my next one is another film score. I have a lot of these. One of my favorite scores is from the Italian composer Fabio Frizzi. And one of my favorite scores from him is Lucio Fulci's Zombie, which is one of my all-time favorite films. This is the version that has like dialogue in between the songs, and this is the version that has it's a B-side. It has Cannibal Ferox, which is also Make Them Die Slowly, another really rough Italian horror film. But I just love this stuff. I love the soundtrack for Zombie because it's got the dark, brooding stuff, but there's also a few lighter tracks like kind of calypso kind of things because they're in the Caribbean from when, you know, early in the film before the zombies come out and attack everybody. And I was lucky enough to see Fabio Frizzi twice in concert.
Wow.
He came over from Italy with his band, and one of the second time, first time was really cool because he just played cuts from all his films. The second time was really cool because it was on Halloween night and they played Lucio Fulci's The Beyond in a movie theater, but his band was set up under the screen and they actually played live, and I couldn't believe that they were able to sync it to the film so well. And I took my wife, who's not a huge horror movie fan and is not a fan of Italian horror cinema. She's always like, she's always like, those movies make no sense, but she loved, you know, she just thought it was so awesome that these musicians could somehow time everything to go in and out, you know, and sync it up with the screen in front of a live audience. That was very cool.
I like the movies. I'm a big fan of, you know, gore films like that.
Oh yeah.
I didn't see that. You're lucky you saw that. That's awesome.
Terry, I'll keep going in a direction that you would have never expected. My next one I heard, but I didn't pay attention to until probably, I don't know, 3 years ago or so. I had somebody gift me a record. And so I was like, yeah, okay. You know, just kind of tossed it to the side and said, we'll get to that in a minute or two. And so when I finally got to it and listened to it, I was like, wow, I don't even know what to say about this. It's so good. And again, it's about the emotion of the grabbing and jerking on the soul a little bit. But and who I'm talking about, this is the one that's probably going to floor most people, is John Legend, Love in the Future.
Really?
Oh my God. It's so good. We could go, there's albums I could have put in this thing, like maybe a couple of rare Prince albums, but that's still a little too much rock, you know? And so I wanted to stay away from that kind of vibe. But yeah, John Legend, that guy's voice is butter, man. And the soul that he puts into the music, he's one of those guys you want to have the album around if you're ever out on a date. I mean, yeah, wow. I mean, it's just so good. You know, when I get in the car a lot, I just hit shuffle. I've got like 3,000 songs in my phone. This stuff comes up quite often because I've found it, you know, and you know how your phone will register what you're doing.
Yes.
You know, and so it'll shuffle it through quite often. It's really funny to hear Lemmy and then hear John Legend, you know. it's still good, but yeah, man, it's just, yeah, John Legend's so many things. He's pop, he's R&B, he's blues, he's soul. He's just really good, man.
I love diversity. I love mixing it up. My next one is totally different than any of the music we've talked about so far, which is good, I think. I really enjoy it, like when you just said being surprised by something, Jeff. When you can be surprised by experience you didn't expect, it can be so positively lasting. In this case, my wife and I attended a Craig Chiquiso concert in 1996. The Jefferson Starship guitarist opened up for Richard Elliott. Now, Richard Elliott, I'd never really heard. I was a fan of Chiquiso because he was a guitarist in Starship. Then he went solo and did like these acoustic guitar stuff, which is very cool. Richard Elliott, I was really impressed. Scottish-born American saxophone player. He's a world-renowned sax player with multiple chart-topping albums. I think he's done soundtracks. His album from 1994, After Dark, was the album he was supporting at that show, and it's my favorite from him. He's got an incredible guitar player. His name is Richard Smith. He's a smooth jazz guitar player. I was blown away by him. He's a full professor and a former chair at the studio jazz guitar department at the renowned Thornton School of Music at USC. And I just love the intimate, incredible romantic, the way that album After Dark makes you feel. The whole thing. I mean, it's just great. I think there's two brothers play bass and drums. The Reinhardt brothers. Check out Richard Elliott if you like to be romantic with a lady or just feel kind of mellow. His music's awesome.
Mine is definitely not one to listen to if you want to get romantic with a lady. It's actually it's not even music. I love when it comes up on shuffle, and I go to the drive-in quite a bit in the summer, and I will always play these albums. When I go to the drive-in, there's a series of them. There's 7 volumes. I only grabbed a couple, called Radio Spot Apocalypse. Because I'm obsessed with horror movies and exploitation movies from the 70s and 80s, these are vintage radio ads from the 70s and 80s. 30-second, 45-second, and 1-minute radio spots, along with the occasional popcorn ad and go to the snack bar ad.
Wow.
And I just love this stuff, obviously because I'm obsessed with movies from the 70s and 80s. But I have to say too, I think some of these radio spots are quite frightening. Even though I've seen the movie and the movie's not scary, but the way they do the commercials from way back when, they're rather frightening. But I just love this stuff. I also love old movie trailers. So this goes hand in hand with it. But yeah, there's like 7 volumes of this. Like this one's a 4-disc set alone.
Wow.
This is volume. This is number 2. So I don't even know. I got tons of these discs of old movie trailer spots. But I just get the biggest kick out of this stuff.
I totally appreciate that because I'm a horror freak.
That stuff like setting up commercials and what goes on inside the movie and stuff like that. That's amazing. Now, here's another one. I'm a real big classical music person. I kind of like orchestrations and stuff like that. I like listening to it. It soothes me after a long day in the studio, especially if everything's 180 BPMs and I've heard nothing but all day. I tend to do that. One of the soundtracks, this is the only soundtrack that I'm going to bring up in this whole thing, but one of the soundtracks that I really dig and I love to listen to was written by Hans Zimmer. It's a really cool thing, and I can actually show this because I've got a thing over right here. No Time to Die, James Bond, is the last movie. So many ups and downs and so much energy and emotion inside the things that he created for that entire movie. It was funny. I went to see the movie when it came out. Most people walk away going, "Oh wow, that was amazing." I'm walking out the door going, "Where can I get that soundtrack?" I'm like, oh my God, that was incredible. But it's just like I said, it's the orchestration, it's all those instruments and how to tie all that stuff in together throughout a movie. I'll get to know Chris over time as much as we'll do these, I'm sure. But I know it's really just always been interesting to me as to how you interplay video and music to make a documentary, a movie, a short spot, whatever the case may be, because one is so important with, that if they don't mesh up, it's really a failure. So when you sit and you watch a movie, whether it be this or whether it be one of yours, and you're sitting there watching it, and then all of a sudden you don't realize that you got through that 90 minutes or 20 minutes or however long it is. And then once you sit down and think about it, man, the acting was really good. It's just how it all ties together. And for me, that soundtrack made that movie bang for me.
I can definitely understand that. I'm a huge fan of his work. I don't know if many people remember the music he did for Rain Man, but I love that music for Rain. You know, and then he did Lion King. Oh my God, just so many Crimson Tide. I mean, the list goes on and on. So he's a master. He's one of the best of all time. No question about it. Go with my number 6, kind of ties to my last one. It's Craig Chiquiso. His second or third solo album called 1,000 Pictures, 1996. I saw it live when he performed on concert with Richard Elliott. Highly melodic, just beautiful, tremendous positivity for life. It's acoustic guitar, but it's not slow, and it's not soft, and it's not dead. It's very lively. It's not rock. He's not playing like Satriani or anything like that. It's definitely acoustic, but it's like an electric acoustic. I just think that, you know, songs like Sweet Talk, which is there's a music video you could watch on YouTube, Navajo Stars, Why the Dolphins Smile, Autumn Blue, which actually has Richard Elliott on it as a guest. Those are just beautiful songs that could take you out of your normal audio space as a rocker, as a metalhead. You know, if you're having stress from work, paying bills, that stuff will make you feel a lot better about yourself. So that's my number 6.
All right, number 5. So yeah, Black Sabbath was the band that changed my life, but the first band that I ever bought an album from on my own, I was 7 years old. I'm not as devoted to this band as I am Sabbath and Maiden and other bands, but I've always been a big fan since I was a kid of the band Blondie. And you know, the album that I first bought from them was their 1978 record, Parallel Lines. And I got up before because I had the vinyl here, and I'm like, shit, I must have moved it. I have it multiple copies on tape and CD, and but yeah, that's just my favorite record from them. I think it's their best-selling album. It has the Heart of Glass, which is the disco song, but then it's got stuff that's a little harder edged, like One Way or Another, or Hanging on the Telephone, and I've just always been a sucker for good female vocals, and Deborah Harry isn't too hard on the eyes either. So as an impressionable young boy, I was more attracted to Blondie than Kiss. Yeah.
Good choice.
Blondie's one of my favorites.
Yeah, I was lucky to see Blondie a couple times and Deborah Harry solo.
She was almost better solo than she was with Blondie.
Yeah, she did some great stuff.
That's a great choice right there. Kind of sticking with the theme, this chick, when I heard her sing the first time, was on Disney. And I was like, what? Nah. And of course, back in the day, we couldn't rewind it. So, you had to wait for the next episode. And then she sang it again. And I remember like, what? And then, you forget about it. A couple of years go on. And then all of a sudden, you hear her on the radio. And I just knew the voice as soon as I heard it. Then I went and saw her live. And then she progressed. And she progressively got better. And that voice was always killer. Her shows were over the top. This particular album is Christina Aguilera's Strip. Man, what an album. I don't even know where to begin or where to stop on the album. It's full of so much diversity and so much energy. It could be her greatest hits. That album alone. And I saw that tour. I still to this day, it's burned in on my head, what she looked like up there on stage. And back at that time, Britney Spears was out there too, but Britney was lip syncing, and everybody knew Britney was lip syncing. Christina, on the other hand, was not at all in any way lip sync. You could hear her breathing in between the lines as she's doing all this choreography and running all over the place. And she was built like a brick house at that time. Hourglass shape, the whole bit, and just all over the place for 90 minutes, man, just incredible. But that voice to this day is still just priceless.
Got a hell of a singer.
And I love that choice because no one would expect that from you, Jeff.
No, that's what I'm saying. Nobody's expecting news from me. They're like, who is this guy?
Well, this one, my number 5, I appreciate ambient music as much as I like hard rock and heavy metal. I mean, I listen to it daily. I love it. It really gives me balance. There's 2 guys that teamed up for this one album, David Halpling and John Jenkins. They're both ambient artists.
Yep.
And they created an album called Treasure from 2007. There's a quietness, a stillness that I just think is so healthy for me. I think it might be healthy for other people if they gave it a shot. David's one of my favorite musicians in the world. He scored one of my movies, Hair of the Dog. He's also an artist. He created my company's logo, Manta Ray Pictures. He created the poster for Terry R. Wickham's Double Vision. He created the new poster for my next movie, Terry R. Wickham's Anomaly.
Look, this is no fair. You got this guy on payroll.
Yeah. Well, and I'm not trying to do that for that reason, but I'm just a huge fan of his music. So this album, Treasure, which is my number 5 pick, it's just wondrous. He does guitar, ambient guitar. So he does these slow bends with the tremolo bar and picks notes and they sustain, but he also does electronics as well. But some of the, and the thing with David is his sound is always huge, just big, epic. You know, John Jenkins is just as talented and he kind of always has those huge drums. So on songs like The Knowing, Beyond Words, Not a Soul, Not a Sound, Now More Than Ever, it's just exquisite, soul-stirring, beautiful. That's my number 5 pick.
Well, yeah, all right. Well, my pick, cinematic. This was a weird thing. This was a couple years ago. In my opinion, one of the greatest horror movie or just greatest directors of all time. John Carpenter got a 2-album deal to create new music and go on the road, and I saw him in concert. He did these 2 records because for those that don't know, John Carpenter would also score his own movies. He didn't do The Thing, but he did Halloween and Escape from New York, Fog. So when he would go in concert, he would play these songs, but he also played new material. I liked his second record better. He did 2 albums called Lost Themes, and they were basically John Carpenter's, orchestral soundtrack songs without a movie. It was just, movie music without a movie to go to it. And, I love the Carpenter scores, and I thought this stuff was really good. And to me, I almost wondered, well, is it so good because John Carpenter doesn't have to worry about actually making a movie for once? He can actually just concentrate on making music, and I really enjoyed it. And I think they're fun records. And yeah, this is Lost Themes too.
I got to jump in on this because John Carpenter is one of my 3 favorite directors. I'm actually a director because of John Carpenter.
Oh, wow.
The Thing was the movie I walked out of and looked at the poster and said, this guy did this to me twice, 78 in Halloween and 82 with The Thing.
Yeah.
And it changed my life. I went to both those concerts. They were sold out in New York City.
Yes.
They were fantastic.
Fantastic, right?
Oh my God. I would go in a heartbeat.
Yes. I wish he would do more.
Look, he's the only director that's ever done that. Spielberg, De Palma, Hitchcock, none of those guys have, do their own music. They couldn't go on the road like that. I think those albums are brilliant. And I am totally with you on that. I listen to his stuff as much as I listen to this other stuff I'm talking about and heavy metal. I listened to John Carpenter yesterday. He's one of my favorites.
Yeah, he does amazing work. But yeah, those concerts were great. I mean, I was, thrilled to say, yeah, I've seen Fabio Frizzi in concert, seen John Carpenter in concert is just such a crazy thing.
Did you go to the first one in 16 he did in New York at the in Times Square?
Yes, at the Best Buy Theater.
Yeah, it was a Best Buy. What do they call it at the time?
Whatever they call it, PlayStation Theater.
You know what, Jeff, you know what's so cool about that night? You look at the board and John Carpenter's up on Times Square on the thing.
Yeah.
He walked in. I don't know if you remember this, Chris, but his music was playing the whole time, even when he was not on stage. I remember being in the bathroom, standing up with all these guys. We're going to the bathroom, and Prince of Darkness is playing.
Wow.
Like, how freaking cool is that,
Yeah.
right?
It was quite a show.
And everybody,
big movie screen.
Yeah, everybody had a Snake Plissken shirt or Michael Myers or
it was sold out. I mean, it was
awesome.
I have seen so many, hard rock and metal bands there that couldn't give seats away.
Yeah.
But here, John Carpenter sold the place out. It was like 3,000 seats.
Jeff, you got to go.
John Carpenter touched everybody's life in one way or another.
Yeah.
I feel like I've been left out. Thanks, guys. That's what I get for not living in New York.
So now we're to your number 3, Jeff. Number 3.
This is my number 3. This next one came out in the mid-90s and is single-handedly, even though it's not hard rock and it's not metal, it's more alternative. This chick completely opened the door for all the females, Julie, for myself, Veronica, all the females that came after her. This girl opened the door for them with an album that absolutely could not be contained. I mean, you can forget it. This album took off like a bat out of hell, and that's Alanis Morissette's Jagged Little Pill.
Yeah.
You want to talk about an album that's full of hooks. You could put that album, dip it down in the ocean, and you'd come up with a megalodon. You know what I'm saying? I mean, that album is just unbelievable, and it couldn't have been anybody. It had to be her, because look back at it, there was no other girl at the time that attacked the content that she put into her songs as far as lyrically and about her own life and about relationships and all this other stuff. and how she was just blatantly honest about it, and very bludgeoned a couple guys.
Wow.
So but it was just the attitude that she put into it, and the energy of the music, and then you look at it, and here we are 6-7 years later. Hydrogyn, Benedictum, Nightwish, Flyleaf, all these bands started coming out, female singers, and that album, anytime I hear an Alanis Morissette song anywhere, I stop and listen to it. I was at a club the other night, and there was a girl sitting there playing acoustically. She started playing an Alanis Morissette song, and she knew that I knew the song. She knew who I was, and she asked me to come up and play it. So I went up and played it on guitar for her while she sang it.
How cool is that?
It's just one of those things. She's one of those artists. She never scored that big again with her other albums, although her other albums sold well. But there's a difference between doing well and then just owning the entire planet. And they're from like 96 to 2000. She owned the planet as a female. But that's an album that I still listen to quite a bit.
Very, very, very good choice. Believe it or not, I've heard a lot of the songs off it, but I don't have that album. I just remember a lot of people I used to know would talk about her live too. They said she was amazing. I didn't see her, but yeah, they really raved about her.
She had a very weird energy about herself. I mean, she did her own thing. She was her own person. And that's the only reason you call the energy weird, because if you're not her, you're not understanding where it's coming from. But when you left her show, it was like, good Lord, that was awesome.
Might come as a little bit of surprise because they're known as a little bit of a rock band, but I wouldn't call them hard. But this album in particular got a lot of criticism back in the day because it was not enough rock to it, because they kind of went a little more electronic. This album came in 1985. I was in the military in Germany at the time. What it reminds me of, and it's one of the reasons why I like it so much, is because it reminds me of a cross between the 3 songs from Tawny Kane and Triangles from the Terminator, if you remember the scene in Tech Noir, mixed with the film scoring, the electronic film scoring of Jonathan Ellis. He did like Vamp, Tough Turf, Children of the Corn. So he had like a certain synthesized sound, and that was the band called Quarter Flash.
Oh God,
sure.
Yeah.
And it was their 1985 album called Back Into Blue. And a lot of people were upset because it was too electronic. Might even have electronic drums. When I listened to that album, if you really listen to it closely, it is so cinematic. Because if you remember at the time, you had Simple Minds, Wayne Chun, album, movies like Breakfast Club and all those John Hughes movies were coming out. And they were always jammed with all these songs because they wanted them on MTV to help sell soundtracks, to help sell the movie. So this kind of, to me, was an album kind of made for that. It was on Geffen, so it was a major release back in 85. The vocalist Rindy Ross and her husband, guitarist Marv Ross, are kind of, to me, like a lesser known Pat Benatar and Neil Girardo. They both work together and they're kind of a rock band. Maybe Benatar's a little harder, but I don't think they ever got the same attention. But I think she's got a seductive voice, no doubt. To me, what separates them from other people, especially on this album, is their saxophone playing. On songs like Walking on Ice, Caught in the Rain. It's just, I think it's supremely underrated, and it's misjudged album because if you listen to it closely, it's got so much hook value, and it's kind of cinematic. So my choice is Quarter Flash, Back Into Blue.
That's a brilliant pick. I didn't see that coming from anywhere. Especially sitting here looking at your Raven shirt.
Yeah, right? The 2 Gallagher brothers, right?
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember Quarter Flash from Harden My Heart.
That's it. Yeah, that was the album before
That's
that.
what I remember.
Yeah.
I guess I'm stereotypical because I'm going more film scores. This was I saw my all-time favorite horror movie, Dawn of the Dead, on home video on VHS in 1983, and I just loved it. To this day, it's still my all-time favorite horror film. I kept watching it over and over again, and I just loved the music in the movie. And I eventually went out and got the soundtrack album. I should have brought the original vinyl, but it's somewhere in the collection. They did the scores for 2 of my favorite films, Zombie, which is the Italian title for Dawn of the Dead, and Suspiria from Dario Argento. And man, I just love these soundtracks. I mean, I love the movies, but I listen to scores all the time. And I was lucky to see Goblin came to America a few times and played all their scores. And that was also very cool. I mean, it's really crazy to think that, and I said it to quite a few friends, like, man, in a short period of time, like, we had Fabio Frizzi, Goblin, and John Carpenter all touring America at the same, not too far from one another, and all playing these amazing film scores. Like, this is a crazy world we live in. But yeah, and one of the Goblin shows, they played Dawn of the Dead performed underneath. Yeah, they've also done it with Suspiria.
That is very cool, Chris. And by the way, did you go see when Dawn of the Dead was released in 3D back in October?
I saw it twice. Yeah.
Oh my God, Jeff! I don't know if you saw it. I don't know if you saw it, but oh my God, Goblin's music coming out of that Dolby, whatever they had, Dolby Surround and everything in 3D. I mean, it is like I was back in 1982, 83 when I saw it the first time. I didn't see it when it was first released, but I actually think it might look better then, and the sound was incredible. So.
Oh yeah, I mean they remastered the film. Richard Rubenstein, the producer, spent millions of dollars to clean it up, and it looks fantastic.
Yeah, Jeff, if you get a chance, check out that Dawn 3D.
I will.
Oh my, great choice.
So my number 2, I remember the first time I heard this guy, floored me. Just floored me. I was just like, wow, what is that, man? It's so smooth. It was just an acoustic guitar and a voice. And the voice was unlike any voice I'd ever heard before. That wasn't somebody that wasn't from Motown. You know, we go back and think about Motown and some of the things that came out of Motown. You know, of course, we all know that was a black artist label, you know, back in the day. But those voices, their voices were so much different. They were, you know, they were smoky. They had depth. It was really weird. Like, why do they sound like that? And then this sounds like this, and it's just like, doesn't make any sense. So it's been years and years, and then I heard this album. Actually, I think it was an EP, considered an EP. It was like 7 songs. It's in 1999. It was released by an artist that a couple people might know. His name's John Mayer. It's called Inside Wants Out. And it was kind of the introduction to him. You know, Bodies of Wonderland and all that stuff, just him and an acoustic guitar. I think they recorded the album actually in a club down in Atlanta, Georgia, if I'm not mistaken. Or at least recorded the demos for him to get that done. That was my introduction to that. And that, to be honest with you, I'm not crazy about John Mayer's plugged in stuff. I like him on an acoustic guitar. Just his voice and that guitar and what he can do with those two things together. I think that's a game changer, and I think that opened the doors for a lot of other people like that coming up behind him that went on to do well. Also, you know, that was in 1999, but what a great release. You know, just a fantastic album. I wish that the world actually had more stuff like that, because once you strip music down and you do it like that, and those two things work so well together, you really get to feel the emotion of what's going on.
This next one could be number 1 for me. I mean, all these next 3 are just basically interchangeable, but this one is a 1980 album. I didn't hear it then. I didn't hear it until I think 85 when my friend turned me on to the Windham Hill artist. But he's one of my favorite all-time artists by far. I think his music is timeless. It's forever inspiring. It's comforting. I fell in love with George Winston's piano from the first note I ever heard. On that trip to Augsburg, that's where I've heard him the first time. And his album Autumn, I mean, God knows he's got so many different albums, but this was his 1980 album Autumn. Oh my God, it's just comforting to me. I can't tell you how many times I've been in the dentist, or if you're getting a shot at a doctor's office, I will think of his piano to relax me and take my mind off the drill going on my teeth, or, you know, something else that's nasty. You know, you're feeling sick. There's just something about that music that's just so comforting to me. I think it's important that people have a balance. You know, you can't be, you know, Slayer, Metallica, Raven, you know, every second of the day or every second of the month or the year. You've got to have something that kind of gives you a little bit of balance. And George Winston, to me, is one of the guys that does that. Actually, when I tried to do my first feature film in 1987, I was in the Army in Louisiana. I cast these high school kids locally from Lake Charles, Louisiana. We went up to Oklahoma to my friend's house in Hominy, and we tried to do a feature film in 2 weeks, which we were all not really ready for, especially me as a director at that age. We didn't have enough time, and the script was too big. One of the actresses had a nervous breakdown about 3 days into the shooting. So I knew we were not going to pull it off. So instead of just continuing and knowing it was not going to work, I decided, let's shoot a music video just for us. Wasn't something we sold. Couldn't make money off it. Didn't have the band. I took George Winston's song off this album called Colors Dance, which is about fall with the leaves. We told this little romantic story with 2 of the actors from the movie, and we finished it, shot it, and we walked away with something that could make us feel good, even though it was a very negative overall experience of not finishing a movie. But the songs on this, Woods, Lawning Love, Road, Moon, Sun, Stars, those are very dear to my heart, and I could listen to them at any time, especially when things are kind of intense. that's the best time to listen to George Winston. All right, so the next one for me, my number two, 1999, David Helpling's Sleeping on the Edge of the World. It's just massive soundscape designed to reach the deepest level of your heart and soul. It's not really hard or fast, but you'll hear echoes of U2 every once in a while because David's a big fan of the Edge's guitar playing, but it's not really heavy. But songs off his second album I love are like Rain Falls, Sleeping on the Edge of the World, Deepest Days, Sticks and Stones, All Things End. I'll admit, I've listened to David's music whenever I've had a really bad thing in my life happen. When my father passed away 3 years ago, I put his music on after to kind of deal with my father's, losing my dad. In 2009, there was a girl that I really liked from high school. We actually never dated. We should have. And I remember when I was in the Army, my mom called me up and said, your girlfriend got killed in a car accident. And I was actually in basic training at the time. And I said, what do you mean girlfriend? Your friend Chris. Her name was Chris Garupa. And I said, Mom, I can't talk about it right now. And I kind of cut her off. And do you know, I never brought it up for 25 years. I forgot that she died. And in 2009, I realized I never paid my respects to her. I didn't really know her that well. I didn't know her family, and I felt like an idiot. I was very upset. Believe it or not, I actually cried when I realized I never gave my respects. And when I did, I put David's music on. This album, Sleeping on the Edge of the World. It's really comforting to me. It's very intimate and personal. And I just love his music, and that's my album. All I can say is, you guys haven't heard David's music, check out David Helpling. He's a master.
Absolutely. A couple of killer picks right there.
Yeah, for sure.
Number one.
Number one. All right. Yeah, I'm sticking with the theme. This is another film score. I saw this movie. My dad took me when I was 11 in 1982. It's one of my all-time favorite movies. I've got the symbol from the movie tattooed on my arm. I own my own personal 35 millimeter film print of this movie. I've got the swords from it. I've bought the soundtrack album 4 times. I actually saw it yesterday, was the 40th anniversary screening of it. This is the original CD of Conan the Barbarian soundtrack from Basil Polidoris. And this is the more recent triple disc, which has all the unused cues and outtakes. It's just amazing. It's my all-time favorite soundtrack. It's big and explosive and epic at times, but there's also a lot of quiet stuff with bells and chimes. I just love it. I always listen to this record when I go on a long drive, and I always say, I was never in the military, but if I was ever in the military and I had to go into battle, this is the soundtrack album that I want blaring while I'm making the charge, and I just love it. I listen to the record all the time. Like I said, I saw the Conan re-release yesterday in the theater. So
wow, that was a great choice, Jeff. Right?
Oh, absolutely, that was stunning. How was the re-release?
Honestly, it could have been a little better. The digital print that they used, it had some hairs and some scratches. But also the tint of the movie was kind of bluish. So I kind of felt they could have done a better restoration, since they were putting this back in theaters for a limited time. But, it was great. I've only seen it a handful of times in the theater. So it was always great to see it again. But yeah, I was hoping it would have been cleaned up a little bit. Typically, what most of these studios do is they go make a 4K master, and then they put it back in theaters for a limited time, and then a month later comes a 4K home video disc. But after watching it last night, I'm like, oh shit! Well, I hope they clean this better up for the home video version, because at least the Blu-ray that I have at home, I think, looked cleaner.
That was an incredible pick too. I didn't see that coming.
Oh, I love that score. Yeah, I can listen to it every day.
My number one pick comes from the person who originally put me on my path to everything that I do. From the minute I heard this album as a kid, this album came out in 1969. And I heard this album, bought it brand new in 1969. It has so much. It was probably the live album that created the whole live album phenomena of the 1970s. And everybody, when they think about that, they think about Frampton, UFO, Kiss, Aerosmith, Foghat, all these great releases that are out there in hard rock and metal. This album is Folsom Prison from Johnny Cash.
Wow.
It's got everything on there. Like, let me just tell you, 25 Minutes to Go, Cocaine Blues, Busted, The Long Black Veil, Jackson, I Got Stripes, and there's like 25 songs on this album. You know, Johnny Cash went into a prison and recorded a live album, and when it came out, it sold hand over fist millions and millions of copies, and it continues to sell every year. But that album, persona that he'd always showed, but on that album, that particular album, he knew, you know, I've got to really bring it home, because he had to talk the record company into doing this. You know, we got to put a crew inside of one of the biggest federal prisons in America, because you want to record a live album. And he was like, you just don't understand the energy. I still listen to that album. Matter of fact, when I used to do acoustic shows all the time, I always put Big River and Cocaine Blues in my set from him, because they're stories, and they're such brilliant stories. So, you know, but Johnny Cash was always the first person I ever listened to, you know, and I kept that theme. And I go from Johnny Cash to Ronnie James Dio, and it kind of, you can see that attitude in both people, you know. And so I just kind of upped my game a little bit as I got older, you know, and I worked in David Coverdale and Ian Gillan and all those people who all still fit that mold. Yeah, Folsom Prison Blues from Johnny Cash is probably my top non-metal hard rock album that I always listen to.
Yeah, that's a great choice. And I didn't see that coming.
Good.
Good. I love surprises. I love surprises. My number one pick is a band that I first heard in 2005. I believe I heard their EP on the internet, and I was really taken by it because I'd never heard anything like it. They're in a music that, you know, everybody tries to label music, right? We all know that. And whether that's good or bad, it's just a label. But for some reason, they call their type of music shoegazing, which is an unusual kind of music. It's like a post-rock, ambient, cinematic style of music. It was two guys that were part of alternative rock band from Nashville, Tennessee, that broke away from the music business because they didn't like the way it was headed. And they created this band at first not to release anything, just to kind of have fun. And they ended up releasing the EP, and one thing led to another. Now they have 10 albums out. I think they're one of my favorite. I put them up with Dream Theater and Judas Priest and, you know, Dokken and David Helpling. One of my favorite bands of all time. I missed them when they came to New York in 2008 because my daughter was about to be born. And to this day, I've never had another chance to see them live. But this is a band called Hammock. HAMMOCK. They are freaking amazing. The two guys are Mark Bird and Andrew Thompson. I've been wanting to try to get them on my show, but they're kind of busy. But every time I reach out to their manager, oh yeah, Terry, we know who you are, because I've been reviewing their albums since they first came out. But their second album from 1996, or 2006, excuse me, Raising Your Voice, Trying to Stop an Echo. It's just poignant, deeply moving, inspires me to my core. It's kind of slow, brooding, dark guitars that sometimes are backward with lots of reverb and echo. Then they sometimes put in orchestration. There's voices in there that aren't always there, whether it's just a kind of a choral voice, or maybe think Bird's wife sometimes will sing, not leads, but she'll come in with voices. Sometimes they'll both sing. Oh my God, I just was blown away. And I know that David Helpling likes like ambient music, of course, or shoegazing music. I remember when I recorded one of I think this album, and I shared it with him. You know what his response was? He goes, holy fucking shit. He's like, those guys are awesome. Oh my God, those guys are awesome. And I think David, not in copies, but may have been inspired by their approach after he did his. But it's haunting. It's all at once dark, positive, and enriching all at the same time. Their music is, it's like part of my soul. I just love it. Their second album is my favorite, and that's Raising Your Voice, Trying to Stop an Echo. Oh my God, just masters.
Yeah, I wrote that down. I'm going to look that up.
Look it up. Look it up. You might like it, Chris.
I was going to say, I heard of shoegazing somewhere, and I had to look it up. I'm like, what the hell is that? And I was like, okay, that's interesting.
They're to me, they're the masters of that domain, if you want to call it that. They have a cover of a dead body of a girl in a river, and if you listen to it, it's dark, but it's uplifting at the same time. I don't know how they do it. Check them out, because if you like horror film stuff, you like cinema. Yeah, they've actually done a couple movies too. But I think they're reluctant because they don't want to be part of the machine. They like to be unique. So Jeff, if you could appreciate that. But anyway.
Oh yeah.
Thank you guys for coming on tonight. I really appreciate your knowledge, your choices. I had so much fun doing this.
Absolutely. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
All right. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Chris. It was great.
Yes.
Chris, it's a pleasure, man.
Absolutely, Jeff. Likewise.
You guys, if I don't talk to you again, have a great holiday.
Yes,
Terry, I
you
know
too,
I'll hear
both you
from
guys.
you. So
Yeah. Happy holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, all that good
All
stuff.
that stuff. Yes, for
Yeah.
sure.
Okay.
all right, guys.
All right,
Good night,
cheers.
guys.